Every founder is guessing. Some guesses just age better than others. You said test quickly, learn relentlessly, adjust without ego. Winning is simply guessing well at the right time. Will, explain yourself.
Yeah, it was so funny. I just wrote a post on Reddit, on the startups subreddit today about this. And what I was saying is, like, when I was young, Ed, I used to think that there was this person that was like the startup guru, like the Yoda. Hopefully how people see you and I right now. But what I believed is that back then, I was like 19, if you had silver hair, you must just have the answers, right? They were just like, should I launch this product? Should I raise money? There was just an answer. And the problem was that I didn't ask the Yoda what the answer was. Right? What I would come to learn many years later, with a lot of frustration, is that there are no Yodas. I mean, even Ed, you and I have been doing this for a very long time. I'm 32 years into my career as a founder across 9 startups. And I realized that no one knows the answers. They just have better guesses. They just have better guesses. But holy cow, Ed, how many investors have you talked to that never said that they were guessing, that this is the answer, Ed? I've been listening to your pitch for 4.2 seconds. I already know how your company is going to end. Here's the answer.
They act pretty authoritative, that's for sure.
Right. Pretty sure about themselves, for people who have no idea, here's the irony, who are in the game of guessing and somehow think that they're the ones with the answers. And here's the better part. When statistically their hit rate is so ridiculously low, we're talking about investors, particularly VCs right now, that you would think, if nothing else, it would create a sense of humility that would say, I'll be honest, I've been doing this for a long time, and if I learned anything, it's that nobody actually knows the answers. We get the polar opposite. With founders, we're trying to build something, Ed, that has never been built before in a market that's never existed, with a team that we just put together 5 seconds ago. How could we do anything but guess?
100%. As we say all the time, founders live in the future. And because nobody's got a crystal ball, no one can predict it. It's a tough spot for founders to be in, but you add some guidance here. You say, test quickly, learn relentlessly, adjust without ego. I'm particularly interested in that last bit, but break down those 3 things so that founders know what to do.
When we go into meetings at Startups.com, and this is not so much anymore because I think we built such a good rapport with everybody that's in the room. But in the early days, we'd go into meetings and everybody would have strong opinions, as they should, as to what we should do next. And we eventually adopted this kind of ethos, which was, let's start this conversation by agreeing that none of us knows the answer.
Right.
Instead of like pretending and jockeying like I have the answer, but yours is wrong on something where none of us could actually know until we tested, let's just take it off the table. So we've adopted this new approach over the past 5-7 years, which is let's just agree that we don't know the answer, but we have to test like crazy to get toward it. So we test quickly. We test landing pages. We test marketing strategies. We test product ideas. We test price points. We test everything. And not because we're afraid to make decisions, because we're 100% sure we don't know the answer. And so that's testing quickly, being like, you know what, Ed, instead of you and I debating over what to do, let's debate over what tests we're going to run. Then let's learn quickly from those tests. Oh shit, nobody pays at that price point. Okay, no worries, let's move on. That's where the ego comes off the table. This happens with co-founders all the time. Ed, you and I are co-founders, right? And we both have a strong opinion on how the company should be built, whether we should raise money, whether we should build the product this way, et cetera. And that's fine. But we get into this thing where instead of doing what's best for the company, we do what's best for us. Like we run a test, but we kind of thumb our scale in the test to show that, like, Ed, you were wrong, I was right? And we were another test, you're saying, Will, you were wrong, I was right. and what we end up doing is we're basically just playing to our egos. We're just playing to our egos. Instead of saying what's best for the company, where it's like, well, I want to be right. So that's what's best for the company, which is all messed up.
And that definitely can affect investors as well. Because, Will, I've never met a 100% humble investor. Now, let me just caveat this. I know a lot of great investors, and I know a lot of investors that used to be founders. And I find that they tend to approach things like, oh yeah, I remember being in your shoes and I didn't have it figured out. But talking to institutional investors, well, the ego has been a little much at times, I'm going to admit.
I love when investors talk about running a startup as people who have never run a startup. And what that reminds me of, Ed, is football. It reminds me when football players talk about how fans say what they should have done. And I'll never forget, there was a really like mediocre, and I say this in a kind way, a friend of mine that was a wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. I won't say who it was because I don't ever use people's names, but he's a wide receiver for the Detroit Lions for 10 years, retired from the NFL. And I saw him give maybe one of the best pitches I've ever seen an entrepreneur give. It was for a weighted vest that he had invented as part of his training. And He said, I want to tell you something funny. A lot of people hear about I was in the NFL for 10 years, and they always say things like, "Hey, when I got a catch, like why I didn't just like fight through the defender, etc." He's like, "Let me tell you something. When you're waiting for the ball to arrive, in the biggest human on the planet who has one job, which is to knock you unconscious, is barreling down on you, the last thing on your mind is how much you're getting paid, right?" So he's like, so for all those armchair quarterbacks that like to tell me how football should be played, I dare you to get hit by that guy one time and tell me how football should be played, right? That's the way I think about investors, people who have never been hit and yet seem to have all of these ideas on how founders should run their companies.
Then let's summarize for the founders that are listening. Just accept the fact you're going to be guessing. Don't listen to all the opinions. You're the one living the future. Go out there.
Yep.
We want to recommend test quickly and just say, I'm going to test it, and then learn as you go, and then park your ego at the door and understand other people got egos to play. Any other advice you'd give just to finish this off?
I think this is such a powerful way to build a startup, because at which point you take your ego off the table and you're perfectly fine with guessing and just saying, I'm just guessing. I'm just trying to prove assumptions. Then all of a sudden you take this weight off your shoulders. All of a sudden you're like, you know what? I don't have to be right. I have to find the right answer. That's not the same thing.
Will, you wrote on your LinkedIn, your first move isn't raising money, which we would just want to acknowledge. A lot of our members come to Startups.com because of that, to raise money. You're saying it's building an advisory board, 3 to 5 people you want to see, small equity slice or token payment, instant access to a badass network. Every good advisory board member is 10x expansion of your network. But Will, like, I'm here to raise money. So how do these two connect?
Okay. It blows my mind that this isn't like a default thing for every startup. In side note, Ed and I are working on building this exact product, the ability to be able to automatically build your advisory board with you and for you. But here's the thing. Recruiting investors is really hard. These are total strangers that, are mostly going to say no, are highly incentivized to tell you no, to be honest, et cetera. So instead of wasting your cycles recruiting them first, go recruit friends first, meaning go recruit an advisory board. Now, when people think advisory board, they generally get this concept wrong. Most people just don't know what it really is. A lot of people can confuse it with board of directors. A board of directors tells you what to do. A board of advisors suggests what you can do. They don't tell you to do anything. The idea with the board of advisors is you go out and recruit these people just like you would recruit staff. And they're typically 3 to 5 people. It's very informal. 3 to 5 people who you're giving a tiny equity stake to, like 0.10% of the company, 0.25, so a quarter of 1 point of equity in the company in order for them to be on your advisory board. I highly recommend paying them something with regard to equity, et cetera. Ed, do you see any indications where like not paying someone's a benefit?
I don't, in the sense that most of the time founders, and we talk about this quite a bit, at the early stages, you don't have that optionality. You don't get to be picky, and you want to put something on the table. And it's actually a good exercise. What I do warn against is giving them like 10% or 5%.
Oh yeah, you can get shammed really quickly. Along those lines, if you're going down this path, reach out to us, either through the YouTube channel or, we've got a ton of folks here from startups.com, DM us directly. And if you want to understand how to go down this path, or if you want to understand how to orchestrate it properly, meaning how equity grants should work and what the expectations were, happy to help you out. But here's the thing. Most folks that are looking to raise money, the first thing they say is, well, I want warm introductions to investors. Where do you think those are going to come from? They're going to come from your advisors. So when you're recruiting advisors, you're looking for advisors that have a strong network. Now, part of that network will be finding investors. I'm always like, be mindful that that's a moment in time. Like, you need those connections one time for that one fundraise. Then typically after that, you'll get more of your instructions from your actual investors. But it's important to note that there's lots of things you need a Rolodex for, right? So in a network, you need that for recruiting talent. You need that for recruiting other advisors, by the way. You need that for recruiting customers, that you're trying to get connected to. Having a group of 3 to 5 well-connected people at your disposal that you can leverage their network, their credibility, their social proof for your needs should be the first thing you do. And here's what's cool about that. You don't have to have a single employee. You could have just had the idea 9 seconds ago. Now I'm saying the more you develop things, the better your results will be, but it doesn't take much. Ed, what's your thought?
This is really great. I'm glad we're talking about this. We're just talking about raising capital. It's a really great litmus test. And we see some questions in the FAQ. We'll get to those in just a moment. The litmus test is, can you communicate your idea clearly? I usually use an idea validation deck when I'm going to invite them on, so that if I can get an expert with a good network and they say, yeah, I'll definitely come on board, that's a great signal for me that I've got some things on lock, which is fantastic.
Right.
The other thing I would say, Will, and I see this quite a bit, curious your thoughts. I see a lot of advisors come on board. I'm glad you brought it up for this moment in time. But advisors come in and they say, I want 2, 3, 5% of the company only to introduce you to investors, only to
Yeah,
raise
yeah.
capital for you. That to me is not a good idea.
It's the same parallel with investors, though. There's kind of two categories, if you will, when it comes to this stuff. There's people who understand this market really well and understand that like a quarter point of equity is market. And then there's people that don't understand anything about this market and they can set up all their own rules. The same goes with investors. There's investors that invest for a living. They understand market terms, valuations, et cetera. And then there's investors that they haven't invested in anything. They don't know. I don't even know what market terms would be, and they just make shit up. And so again, when you recruit these advisors, you're invariably going to get one from find people in either category. And so some people will understand that your quarter point's exactly right, and the other one will be like, oh, I need at least 20% of the company to make an introduction. They just don't know any better.
To give everybody context, I'm a pretty darn good advisor. Not to brag, Will, but everybody be lucky to have me as an advisor along with you. And my last advisory contract was for 0.2% of the company, vested over 2 years. So vesting schedules, sometimes cliffs are going to be important. That's okay, everyone. That's in line. So again, as Will said, talk to us. And very happy. We love it when founders offer us advisory shares. We don't really take them up on that offer. It means that we're doing our job and you all see us as valuable, and appreciate the comment from you, Ryan, in there. And yes, will be compensated with alcohol and other things, food, all for it right there. But we appreciate all of you just for even thinking about it.
I always tell people, and I'm fairly adamant about this. I personally don't accept any advisor shares or relationships, and I don't make investments. Now people look at that and like, wait, hold on, you run a company called Startups.com and you don't do advisory or investments? And I was like, yep, that's absolutely the case. And you'd have to understand like what my world looks like. It's one of those, if I do it for one person, I have to do it for everybody, and I don't want to do it for everybody. And there are some people who are like, oh damn, dude, I'm giving up a great opportunity to do something, but I'd rather just be able to tell everybody the stock answer is no and make that fair to everybody than play a few favorites and then try to explain to a whole bunch of people why I don't want to be their advisor. Also, guess what? I'm not looking for another job. I'm pretty happy with the workload that I've got. I don't need more.
But that's what our platform is for.
Yeah.
Will, we advise at scale. Little plug for us at Startups.com.
Yeah.
So come on in, and guess what? You don't have to give up equity. It's going to be great.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just give it to you for free.
This is about time, Will. Time will eat whatever we feed it. A wise founder starves the waste. Say no more than yes. Say no more than yes. Put limits on every task. Guard focus like revenue. Treat your calendar like equity. The greater we are with time, the richer the results. Well, let me just start this one. We have a lot of founders that come to us and we know they need the help. We can help them. And one of the reasons they leave us say, I just don't have time to do this. Time is really valuable, and there's got to be a reason. You got to have, after 30 years of experience, 9 startups, 5 exits. I'm pretty sure you've had a lot of experience with this topic. So share with us what really drove you to write something like this.
A couple things. Number one, I am militant with my time. That doesn't mean I'm like an a-hole about it. It's just that I'm very mindful that my time has value, and not like versus someone else's value. I'm saying that like I only have so many hours in the day. I want to make good use of them. With that said, I did this exercise years ago. This is like 20 years ago. That was life-changing. What I did, most people wouldn't think to do this, but what I did was I decided I was going to just open up a spreadsheet at the time, and I was going to log every 15 minutes of my day for 2 weeks straight. I just wanted to know where my time was actually going, because I think we have a perception that our time goes to useful places. It does not. Most of our time, I mean, the vast majority of our time is bullshit. Most of our time is going toward just mundane tasks or dicking around, you name it. Now, none of us believe that. Like, I'm a pretty like hard charging guy, but as part of that, I'm also really good at managing my time. Ed, you're familiar with this. When I'm not building Startups.com, I'm building a house.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean literally building a house. Like this morning, I was out at the job site at 5 a.m. building a staircase. So like in order to do that, and I've got a wife and 2 young kids, and managing this company as a CEO, that's a lot of work. But you know what? Not if you manage your time right. You know what I do? I don't waste any time. So every minute that I put into everything goes towards something productive. So I can go build a house in my free time. I can, manage my family and, do things with them and build a company. So when people say I don't have the time, I said, no, you don't manage your time. So they said, no. I'm fully baked on everything. Like I'm fully time managed. Like, nah, trust me. You are not. So again, here's what I did, Ed. I ran this exercise. So every 15 minutes, I logged what I do, which I hate doing, by the way. But I logged everything I was doing. Here's what I learned. Most of my time got taken by other people. And whenever someone else took my time, commanded my time, my productivity went through the floor.
Ooh, yeah.
Let me say it again. Most of my wasted time was when I allowed other people to take that time. And again, it's easy to do and you're doing it for the right reasons, right? You know, we've got a bunch of employees, we got a bunch of customers. They take my time. However, and they deserve it, by the way. However, when they do, my productivity, my ability to get stuff done plummets. And so what I started to realize was if I give my time away, if I let myself be available, I will be less productive.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Every single founder can find other ways to maximize, be more efficient, leverage time. But let's just agree and acknowledge out there, like when you're a startup founder, I saw a really interesting post about being a startup founder and it said, it's not like being an employee. There's no job description. There's no org chart that you nicely fit into. When you're a founder of a startup, you're pretty much doing everything. So not only is time so valuable, but you have to spread it across so many different roles. You're wearing so many different hats, and that can really grind the gears. We got a comment, put in the grind from 8 to 3. That's fantastic. It is a grind, and having to shift context switching all the time.
Yep.
That's why this becomes so much more important.
Well, okay, so let's stick with time. I found something that was fascinating. Your time grows to the size of your fishbowl, right? You know, the idea that a goldfish grows to the size of a fishbowl. If you give yourself more time to do something, it will take you longer. If you don't give yourself more time, this isn't just you, it's your team, okay? Here's an example. At Startups.com, Ed, you know this. What is our timeline for planning? How long do we set our goals out?
One week.
Friday.
1 week.
1 week. That's it.
Yep.
No matter what we do at Startups.com, you have until Friday to get it done. That's it. Why is that? Well, I've been doing project management for 3 decades. Here's why. Because anything that has more time to get done will take more time to get done, right? It's one of the reasons software developers suck at forecasting how long things will get built.
Oh, man.
Because we give them enough time to do it. And I'm not picking on them. I'm saying they don't even realize it. So I do the same with myself. I only give myself 1 day to get something done. That's it. Nothing has a timeline that goes longer than a day. I force myself to get something done in a short period of time so that I don't have the opportunity to take longer. And here's the crazy thing. I used to go into the office. I'd be in the office for 16 hours a day. This is for like 15 years. And I found that, Ed, I would be, quote, busy for 16 hours. Then this crazy thing happened. I had a kid. And one day, my wife calls me up at 6. This story is so ridiculous because it's true. My wife calls me up at 6 p.m. at the office. And she's like, hey, what time are you going to be home for dinner? It's going to sound bizarre, but I was like, what do you mean? She's like, dinner. It's what people have at like 6 o'clock. Ed, I was 37 at the time. I had never driven to the office or come home from the office in daylight my entire life.
Wow.
Right? It didn't even occur to me that you were allowed to leave the office at dinner time. But here's what happened. Like this goes to show like how dumb I am. But like all of a sudden I realized like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to be home at 6 o'clock or whatever our dinner time is for the rest of my life. And so I was like, all of a sudden I have to take 16 hours and cram it into 9 hours. Right? I don't have more time because now that time has to go to family. A little weird way for me to recognize that after my kid was already born. I called it dinner, but whatever. We all get there on our own schedule. My point is, I moved that down to 9 hours. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. In fact, I might have been more productive. Right. And I started to realize that as you compress time, you force productivity. It's the same reason we only do 5-day sprints every week at Startups.com.
That goes to what you put in there. And I want to end with this comment about procrastination. Get to that in just a moment. Say no more than yes. So, Will, each of these, let's give like an example in a founder's typical world where they're going to say yes so much and they need to learn to say no. Like, what is that? Meetings, requests? What are we talking about? Yeah,
it's funny. Like, we don't realize how much we can say no to,
right,
and have it not matter. Do you remember, like, long before the days of like texts and DMs and everything else like that, the fastest way to communicate used to be email. And then if you ever noticed you went on vacation and if you were good enough, this was rare for me, but if you're good enough to not pay attention to your emails, when you got back from your trip, you'd have this giant stack of emails. But something interesting would happen. You'd see how many threads resolved themselves before you ever like had a chance to respond. Like, oh, okay, there's like 9 emails that went back and forth and it got resolved. Well, had I been there, I would have been part of all of those exchanges. Right. That would have eaten up all my time. And clearly I wasn't there. It got resolved. I didn't need to be there. Other examples, meetings, it used to be generally like considered bad form if you set an in-person meeting internally or even with a client that wasn't at least a half hour to an hour. It was like offensive if you made it a half hour. That means it wasn't an important enough meeting. As if every decision that's ever been made by humans always required 30 to 60 minutes to complete that decision. It blew my mind. I was like, dude, if we can end this meeting in 5 minutes, let's end it in 5 minutes. Let's not drag it on. And so a lot of you guys and some of the folks in the audience, they participate in my office hours, Ed. And my office hour sessions are 15 minutes. It's not because I don't want to dig into or solve somebody's problem. It's because if I can't figure out what we're supposed to be doing in 15 minutes, there's a bigger problem. I don't need 15 more minutes. I need to figure out a next step that gives us a better next meeting. So what I've found is compressing time is an incredible efficiency tool, which is why you have to say no. No, this isn't going to be a longer meeting. No, I don't need to respond to every DM or email thread. I can make meetings longer. I can respond to everything. It just doesn't necessarily make me a better founder.
And that's what you mean by putting limits on every task. We're going to limit this to 15 minutes. We're going to limit it to what can we get done in this week. I always say, hey, let's limit and compress it. Like you're using the word compression. Compression does some amazing things, such as focus, which brings next thing, guard your focus like revenue. So how does that word picture play in your mind? Well,
yeah, sure. So our dev team is amazing. Our product team, their output is just unbelievable. And the reason their output's unbelievable is because when I say we don't let's the wrong word. We are militant about keeping them focused. Okay. A good example is most dev teams, and I've seen this a million times, will let a million people chime in on what they should be doing. Hey, can you fix this bug? Hey, can you add this feature? Hey, can you do that? We allowed none of that. The dev team is completely cordoned off. And you basically, in most cases, have to go through me in order to change their focus. Because not because I'm trying to be militant about it. It's because I've seen what happens when you don't guard their focus. Yes. They're awesome. So they want to help everybody. And they want to respond to everything at the expense of actually getting nothing done. And so by focusing them on a single task, like we have a massive product roadmap for Startups.com, but the only thing we talk about is what's due Friday.
Right.
And it keeps them incredibly focused. And guess what? We always get our shit done by Friday. Why do you think that is? Because we have nothing else to distract us.
Yes, it's a beautiful system. Our product launches, I can definitely attest, are fantastic. The final thing, treat your calendar like equity. I'm going to say, yes, you've got limited number of shares. You can't expand that. What takes up the cap table as far as your calendar is concerned? Guard that, look at it and say, what ROI am I getting from the time that I'm using?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for a lot of people, we look at our time as something that's fungible because it's like our health. It's free until it's not. And I think for a lot of people, especially as founders, we run into this world where we're like, oh my God, like I'm being pulled in all these directions and I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much to do. Not really. I mean, yes, there are things to do, but the goal is to make that list as small as possible, not as big as possible. Here's a good example. I've got a 9-year-old son, and like any other kid, he'll mess up his room. If I walk into the room and I say, hey, my son's name is Will, I said, hey, Will, can you clean your room? The first thing he'll look at, think of the founder metaphor. He'll look at a big, messy room, and he'll see all that, like an overwhelming amount, and he'll say no. But if I say, hey, man, will you just put your Xbox controller away?
Right.
He's like, oh, yeah, of course, no problem. He'll put it away. Cool. Can you go put those toys away? Oh, yeah, sure. Like, once you break it into small tasks, nothing seems like a big deal. That's me building my own house. Like, I'm building my own house, right? That would seem unbelievably overwhelming, but it's not. This morning, when I woke up at 4 a.m. and I went to the job site at 5 a.m., I had one task, and that was to put one stair stringer up. That's it. Now, I have to build a whole house, but today, for 2 hours that I needed to be there, I had one task. And that's how I focus on everything.
Compartmentalizing, that's a great technique. So, Will, you're giving permission to all of us, what we're saying. You can be greedy with your time because the results, you're just going to get so much richer with it because of that.
You'll get more done.
I love it. Let's address some comments. I want to talk about this procrastination just for a second. Yes, it does prevent production, but I want to say something that I learned, Will. Procrastination doesn't necessarily mean a character flaw. Procrastination could be me dealing with something psychological that makes me want to self-comfort or self-medicate and find something. So there are reasons that we procrastinate. Just want to acknowledge that. Let me read these down. And then, Will, if you got some comments, let me know. Want to acknowledge, some people, they're putting in long hours. And yes, founders, we see you putting in long hours. Make sure you take care of yourself. I like this comment. As a solo founder, I've chosen to build out teams for national, international launch. Team already exists. And manage that team, which is part of managing the time. And the team actually has cohesive working relationship. Will, I see you doing that a lot as well. So managing time, that gives us a lot of security, by the way, everyone. When you have a CEO that guards your time and manages it with systems, you feel so much more secure working for that company. And we talk about, hey, we got meetings when there could be an email. Will, I would argue sometimes a face-to-face meeting, like you and I were going to get together at the end of September, we could easily email, Slack, talk on the phone, but sometimes that's important. And what are your thoughts on all these comments that are coming in? And I appreciate you, chat, and the audience bringing it all here.
So a few things. First off, there's absolutely a time and a place for the in-person meeting. There's a time and a place for a Zoom, a video call versus a phone call versus a Slack versus an email, as you kind of go down the chain. But I think it's also important to recognize what those are. As an example, like when we do a leadership meeting, Ed and I are part of the leadership team at Startups.com. When we do a leadership meeting, we have an hour allocated. Ed, we rarely ever get to an hour, right? I'm not one of those people that's like, hey, the meeting was an hour, so I have to fill that time. If we can wrap that meeting in 10 minutes, we're done in 10 minutes. On top of that, how many times, Ed, do I fire into Slack? Guys, there isn't enough to warrant us having a leadership meeting. Let's just drop in the comments here anything that's relevant and get that hour back. Like, I look for every opportunity to not have a meeting. And not because I don't love talking to my coworkers. Everyone's awesome. It's because I'm very mindful of taking away their time.
Absolutely. Will, you are the co-host of Startup Therapy Podcast. So just to segue into this, we'll get to this in just a moment. Tell everyone what Startup Therapy Podcast is.
Yeah. So we started this podcast, I don't know how long ago, at least 5 years ago, probably longer. What it was is Ryan Rutan, who's my co-host on the podcast, and I had this thing where we kept giving founders the same advice about being founders. Now, let me give you a difference. There's tons of advice out there about how to build a startup. There's not a ton of advice there how to be a founder, right? How to deal with the day-to-day anxiety and everything else like that of what it means to be a founder. And there's a lot. Like we just recorded an episode an hour ago. I think it's like our 350th episode. I mean, there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
And that one was, why is it so hard to get alignment with everybody in your life? Why is it so hard for a founder to be aligned with both their employees, their investors, their co-founders, their spouses? It's because it's nearly impossible for everybody to agree with what we do. And so we unpack that nuance. We explain how to deal with it. In the number of episodes, 350 episodes, the number of topics we cover is massive, but it's also no bullshit. And we are incredibly vulnerable about how we deal with the process.
You said the magic word, Will. It says right here, you wrote, being vulnerable as a founder isn't weakness. It's your secret weapon. Builds real trust with your team, attracts people who believe, not just comply, creates space for others to show up fully, turns pressure into connection. We're not here to pretend we have it all together. We're here to build something real. Before you make a comment on this, Will, because I know we've got 350 some odd episodes of backing this up and practicing what you preach. I came here to Startups.com because I had a very nasty co-founder breakup. It was so rough, brought up all my childhood trauma issues and you name it. And then I started listening to Startup Therapy and I said, who talks like this? Finally. and then I was listening before you invited people to founder groups. And then finally, I believe I was like one of the first episodes I heard. By the way, everyone, we get together and you can talk with us, join the membership. And then, Will, today we had another founder who wants to come back. He exited his startup. And everyone, these are success stories we celebrate. He said, Ed, life-changing money. He said to me, my give a shit list drastically changed after my exit, right? And I said, good for you. I know everything that you went through. You deserve it. And he said, how do I get involved here? I want to give back because I wouldn't have made it if I didn't listen to the Startup Therapy podcast because it's
I thought that was cool. I was like, wow.
It's so lonely being a CEO.
Yeah.
And he said, finally, to have someone talk like that. And he was sharing, and he was just talking about the vulnerability that you share. So, Will, from your heart, why is vulnerability such an important thing, especially when it comes to this list that you put out here?
Well, vulnerabilities is a new thing for folks. When I say that, bear with me. Ed, you and I are the same vintage as far as age. So we've been through the professional world for a long time. And I'm in my 32nd year of being a CEO. So I can tell you my journey as a CEO has been through a lot of eras of what it meant to be a leader. And let me tell you this. In the 90s, nobody was talking about vulnerability. I promise you, no one was talking about vulnerability. My favorite movie of all time is Wall Street. Gordon Gekko, right? The epitome of alpha male, right? Whatever, weakness is never spoken about, right? So my idea, this is the Jack Welch era, right? Like my idea of being a leader was anti-vulnerable. You were not allowed to talk about vulnerability at all, right? That's what weak leaders did. Strong leaders, just soldiered through it. The world changed, man. The world changed. Again, I just came up in a different era under a different set of conditions. But fortunately, and I mean this in good and bad ways, because there's some merits and some downsides. It all of a sudden became okay to say I don't know. It all of a sudden became okay to say I'm scared, right? Which you would have never heard a leader say before. And so like there were things that I thought were just taboo that you just weren't allowed to ever express. Right. Again, like words like I don't know. It didn't occur to me that that was part of what could be a founder or CEO's lexicon. And that wound up being like one of my greatest strengths is to be able to confidently say, I don't know. In a phrase I use often is I don't have the answer and neither do you. To remind us that like it's not me saying I'm better than you. I'm saying that none of us knows. So let's figure it out together. And I think the vulnerability part started to stem from that. And I got to say, like, everyone has their little generational warfare of like the boomers versus Gen X versus millennials, et cetera. I'm a straight up Gen Xer, but I got to give the millennials credit. The millennials are the ones in the workplace that introduced the idea of vulnerability.
That's so true.
And it took me a minute to warm up to that because I was like, I'll give you a couple examples because I think these are hilarious. I'm in a job interview. This is like one of my earliest job interviews with a millennial. Millennials like 22 at the time. And he had just come out of a really expensive art school that costs like $120,000, like top 10 art school that I'm a huge fan of. And he's applying for a role as a designer. He said his dad had worked construction to help put him through design school. And if you're a construction guy, my dad was a carpenter. Like the idea of going to art school isn't like the first thing on your mind or paying for it. So he put his kid through it. And this kid's doing the interview. And I start telling him what the job's going to be. And the kid says to me, he says, yeah, that's not really work that I'd be interested in. Like what else would I be doing? And I was like, wait, huh? You're allowed to say that? You're like, he literally in the interview said that isn't work that I would enjoy. And we're just talking about design work. This was exactly in his wheelhouse. And Ed, all I could think of at the time was, can you imagine if his dad, the construction worker, was sitting in this interview right now and he was like, son, that guy is offering to pay you while you're still living at home and I just paid for all of your art school college and you're telling him this is work you don't want to do. But it made me realize that he was just being honest. He was just being honest. Which is a very sincere form of vulnerability. Now, to be fair, don't freaking say that in an interview. Like that's, if that's how you feel, actually don't say that. But it was the first time I was confronted by this raw vulnerability, this raw honesty from someone, and it blew me away. It didn't even occur to me that someone could say that. And as time went on, as we got more of that generation into the workforce, they were vulnerable about things. Like all of a sudden, the mental health day became a thing, right? And again, I say this because you got to understand, there's some of us that this didn't exist. That was new. Some of you are like, of course, there's mental health days. That wasn't when I was growing up, right? But I'd come to understand that is an expression of your vulnerability. I mean that in a good way. Like in the same way, like I have a backache, I'm injured, whatever. Like we all are vulnerable. Like shit happens, right? But it was interesting to watch that evolution inside myself, to start to realize that the vulnerability was an acute form of honesty. It was an acute form of honesty. And it's something that I hadn't, and not that I was being dishonest, I didn't know that I could just be honest about things. And so, Ed, if you start to see some of my, more recent in past years, posts or startup therapy, I'm pretty transparent about stuff.
Yes, you model it for the rest of us. And if anyone's visited my YouTube channel, I'm always airing out my dirty laundry. But right here, you wrote, and this is so true, builds real trust with your team, attracts people who believe, not just comply. I would say like missionaries versus mercenaries.
Yeah.
Creates the space for others. Will, you do that well. You model that for us. Shows pressure and connection. And I just want to share with everyone, and I got a question for you after this. Will, they did this Harvard study, and I think it was Harvard, and they asked all these millennials, which are now, they're all in management now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they said, what makes you really want to follow a leader and work hard for a company? And they said, authenticity. So the word authenticity has come up a lot.
Yep.
And we got to thank all the millennials and everybody for bringing that to bear. But then they asked, so what shows you that the leader, your manager, is authentic? And they said vulnerability. Willing to be transparent with their emotions, to share feelings and things like that. And when we are in such a talent war, you see people are getting $100 million bonuses to jump on the AI teams. People, the smartest thing that we can do as CEOs, and I know you've done this, is get people that make us look dumb working on our teams, and you lead them with your presence and authenticity, vulnerability. And that is a superpower for your startup to help you succeed.
I did this for the first time in public back in February. I think I told you about this, Ed. I was called on to give a speech at this keynote presentation at this entrepreneur summit. And they asked me, because there's going to be a lot of students in the audience, they asked me if I could share a vulnerable story. And again, even though I understand the concept, it's not my default. And Ed, you and I talk about it sometimes. You're like, well, you're not posting enough stuff, on social, et cetera. Like the things you're doing and how you feel. Because I'm not holding anything back. It's just not second nature to me.
Sure.
But anyway, I get up there. And I told this huge audience about how when I was growing up, I didn't have much. I had a single mom. I had met my dad, and every day I would basically have to try to figure out how to feed myself. And as I'm giving this presentation, I'm watching like people in the audience like tear up, right? And I was like, damn. And I didn't want them to feel bad for me. Like that wasn't my goal. My point in the way I opened it up was like, look, I came from nothing, and I don't have any superpowers whatsoever, right, that I bring to bear, which means if I can do it, you can do it, right? Now, I was trying to kind of like lower the bar. So afterward, after the presentation, a line forms of all these people that want to talk to me. Something that they're going to ask, fundraising questions or startup questions. Every single one of them is like, yeah, I never met my dad too. Or this one young woman was like, I was the first person to escape my Indian reservation in order to be able to come here. I was like, escape? She's like, yeah, it's a real thing. And they were all talking about how they had these really vulnerable, traumatic experiences in order to get in this room today. And they're all like in college and stuff like that, right? It occurred to me how powerful that sharing that vulnerability is. I'm not great at it. I'm not going to say I'm great at it, but it blew my mind to see how well connected people would get when they saw someone would share their vulnerabilities.
Founders, if you're out there and you're wanting to build a personal brand, you're wanting to attract talent, it even works with investors. Everyone, we like to drag on them a lot, but investors are people too. And you share, that is something that you can stick in your back pocket. It's a skill you can learn and take advantage of.
Yeah. One last thought there, Ed. And I'm curious your thoughts. There's also a segment of people now, like in the creator economy, that are abusing the vulnerability. Like, right? Like it's just become like they just want to like shower you with their vulnerability, and it feels so fake and disingenuous. And so when I share it, like it's usually with purpose. Like here's why. Not just sharing it to share it. Like it just it grinds my gears a little bit.
Appropriate vulnerability. Let's just put it that way. Success usually came from one big bet. Most founders don't win by doing everything right. They nailed one thing, one market, one feature that actually mattered. Find your one thing, then go all in. But what were you thinking of? Because I'm sure if you've experienced the same thing I have, founders who are doing the opposite. What was going through your mind when you wrote this?
There's a quote by Mark Cuban, and I'm not a fan of Mark Cuban. I'm not a fan of Mark Cuban. Just it is what it is. But he basically said, you only have to be right once. And to be fair, he was right exactly once. Now, when I say that, he bought the Mavs. I mean, he's doing so many cool things.
Sure.
But Mark Cuban's Mark Cuban because of what he did once, which was build Broadcast.com, sell it to Yahoo at the absolute right time, cash in on the Yahoo stock. Like, I mean, he's a billionaire for something you've never heard of and would have never heard of. And I don't discredit that. I'm saying that proves his point. He's like, the reason I was able to buy into the Mavs or everything else that I've done is because I did one thing right. I was in the right place at the right time. And it's not luck, right? But I did one thing right. Most founders, the summation of their success is having been really right at one point. Here's the myth. Not being right constantly, right? Give some examples. Bill Gates was really right at the right time with Windows, right? When the world needed a visual operating system, he was really right. You could even argue at MS-DOS level, he was really right. But he was also really wrong on a ton of stuff after that, right? Kind of missed the internet entirely.
Oh, man.
Right? Missed the browser. I mean, missed mobile. Not just missed a couple of things, right? Missed the most fundamentally important things. Built a great company despite that. But it shows Microsoft is still around because of what they did right back in the 80s. You could argue almost the 70s, but what they did right in the 80s has set them up for so long. Now you're seeing it with Google, right? Google, I would argue, even for as highly valued the company is, I would still argue they're underrated. The number of things they've done right blows my mind, right? Like, how could you win search? I mean, YouTube was a buy, but they got it right, right? One of their greatest assets now. They've done so many things right, but they've still missed on some like major transformations. They're trying to not miss on AI. For most of us who don't get that many shots on goal, you only have to be right once. You only have to get it right once. And by the way, that could happen at any point in your career. The most right I've ever been in my career was in 1999, okay? That was a long time ago. That was like 25 years ago. But that was the most right I have ever been since. I was maybe 27 at the time. I can't get my math right, but like 28, 20, I don't know, so middle late 20s. And our company at that point was $700 million in revenue with about 700 people. I've never built anything like that since, right? I haven't. And I've done 9 startups. I've had 5 exits. I've had plenty of things have gone right and plenty of things have gone wrong. But that was the pinnacle of the biggest thing I will likely ever build. Now, if I had stopped there and for the rest of my life I didn't build anything and I just kind of like cashed out and did whatever, I'd be fine, right? Because all I really needed to do was that. I say this to say 2 things. Number 1, you have no idea when in your life your moment's going to happen. If you're a professional athlete, I can guarantee it's going to happen before 30. Right?
Sure.
unless you're a golfer.
Good
right?
context, yeah.
But short of that, for all of us, it's really hard for us to imagine when that seminal moment's going to happen, right? And it varies all over the map. Second thing is, it doesn't need to happen twice. So we keep thinking in terms of like, I have to be top of my game at 22, top of my game at 42, top of my game at 62. Not really. If you get things really right at any one of those junctures, what you do thereafter almost doesn't matter. Now, I hope you continue to do cool stuff. I have, right? Ed has. But my point is, you only need to get this right once, and it doesn't even have to be crazy right. This isn't like I made $100 million and I never have to think about money again. It could be you made $1 million, but you made it at an early enough point in life where it kind of put you on a fast forward track for a very long time.
Let's talk about the nitty gritty of this because, Will, we have founders, and I see you in the audience, and I know they're on our YouTube channels. They're not working on one thing. They're split all over the place, even more than one thing. In their one startup, they're going after different markets and they're thinking about the 30 features that need to build. Scope is creeping all over the place. It's just bloating left, right, and center. Let's make this really focused for the founder working on their startup right now, especially the new founder and early stage founder. We ask them, what's the one thing that you're going to pitch to investors? Okay. And they say, no, but that's not our startup. We do like these 30 other things all over the place, right? We see this happen all the time. Different markets. No, we're going to go after this market and that market. And they have this really convoluted market slide.
And that's the point. Like from an investor standpoint, you don't win because you did 20 things right. You win because you did one thing right. And then after that, you go on to do another thing right. Right? It's going back to Microsoft back in the days. You win because you dominated on the Windows platform, not because you also launched Office and all these other things. Those are add-ons, but you have to have that first signature win in order to get those other wins. A lot of people are like, no, I want 5 wins at the same time. Never happens. Never, ever, ever happens.
When you are willing to focus on one thing, you can eliminate what is not the one thing. You do this all the time. We do experiments consecutively. We don't do them all the same time because it just muddies up the water. So if you want to improve your chances to get that one big bet, then experiment, go and do these tests, just like we talked about in the previous axioms that Will's put out there. Find that thing, go all in. What's your final encouragement on this?
I would say the moment you split your focus, you geometrically lower your probability of success, right? It's the equivalent of trying to swing at 2 pitches at the same time.
Totally true.
You will absolutely fail. There's a tiny % chance that you somehow miraculously connect on both, but why bother, right? The whole point is to hit once, and I don't want to beat up a sports analogy, but focus on one thing and do it well, then focus on the next. Worry about sequence, not parallelism. Yeah.
Well, what's your final encouragement just to everyone? We have a lot of trial members here. We recorded our content. So what do you want to say to everyone joining us live?
Ask a million questions. That was part of we talked about at the top of the session today about, guessing and not knowing the answers. Just assume going into this world that you know nothing and you'll probably be correct. And that's not a knock on you. That's all of us. We all go into this thing totally naked in the abyss, and that's okay. What we need to do is we need to step back and say, cool, I'm going to question everything. I'm going to ask a million questions about fundraising, about marketing, about hiring, about how I deal with my co-founder. Just get used to asking all those questions. Ask them here. Come to Startups.com. I mean, you don't have to use us if you can get those questions answered somewhere. Just get good at asking the questions. Your curiosity will get rewarded over and over. Assume nothing, and you'll be in great shape.